Let's talk about the Bible sixth seal. Sorry, little guy. Maybe next time. Hello, you wonderful sons and daughters of God, my brothers and sisters. You have probably heard some claiming we are in the seventh seal, here in the 2020s. You may have heard we are in the 7 years of tribulation, or Christ will return in power and glory in the mid-2020s or 2033. From what I've seen, their intentions are admirable. It's very obvious they've put much prayer, thought, and effort in on the topic. Many of the videos have great insights, and their presentations have also had many views, which is a good thing. It's a good sign to see so many people interested in the topic. We need that. Yet, are all the connections they made correct? Or are some of the connections false? Do some of those connections compress or distort the order of events? Are they leaving out key foundational scriptures about the prophetic events of our day? Have they misinterpreted those key fundamental scriptures about the prophetic of our day? Well, we're going to take a look here. Keep a prayer in your heart. This is a great time to have a feast. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the scriptures used and connections made and see if you agree that although what they said sounded convincing, in reality, regarding some key points, they didn't hit the target. They did hit the audience. They got a lot of views. Yeah, but otherwise they shared some great insights too. So we begin with the sixth seal event. And what I want to do is I just want to take a look here at the sixth seal event. And with the sixth seal event, before we jump into that, what I want to do is I want to show you something here. Some people claim that the sixth seal event is regarding this earthquake that happened back in 1202 AD. So it's easy to Google. You just Google it and it'll come right up, and you can take a look at that there. So what we want to find out is it something that happened back in 1202 AD, or is it something to come in the future? Now, that earthquake in 1202 AD, it killed like 1.1 million people. So it was big. But yeah, let's go ahead and look at the scriptures and see what they say and see what you think about it. We're going to begin in chapter 6 of Revelation, and we're going to begin with verse 12. So over here at verse 12, it says, "And when I had opened up the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became red as blood." What caused the earthquake? We get the answer in the next verse. "And the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind." Well, we're talking about asteroids or meteorites or something that by the hundreds are going to impact Earth so violently. Well, let's take a look at the next verse on this. "And the heavens departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places." This is the worst catastrophic event since the flood of Noah's time. And because we are talking about one or more objects coming our way, our powerful telescopes have already detected it or soon will. We will know years in advance. What will we do to protect ourselves? Look at verse 15. "And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every freeman, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains." You see, we know in advance we find shelter. Look what most of the world thinks about this event. "And said unto the mountains, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?" Many think this is the return of Christ in power and glory. And I'm going to show you something over in the Doctrine and Covenants about it. Yet it isn't. This is a sixth seal event. We have a ways to go. Now, Revelation chapter 7 is a continuation of the sixth seal event. Over here in Revelation chapter 7, it's talking about the wind is going to stop blowing. We don't know the full effect of it, but here's what it reads. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 winds of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth, saying, and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Now, so there's not going to be any wind, it looks like, after this earthquake that moves every mountain and island out of their places. So, and the 144,000, they get sealed after that event. So let's take a look at something that Joseph Smith said. This is shortly before his death. I attended a prayer meeting with the quorum in the assembly room and made some remarks respecting the 144,000 mentioned by John the Revelator, showing that the selection of persons to form that number had already commenced. Wow, it already commenced back in Joseph Smith's day. Now, he didn't say that it was complete, but you can see that it wasn't having anything to do with 1202 AD type of earthquake event, right? It's not dealing with that there. Now, let's go ahead and look at D&C section 88. If you want, you can pause the clip right now, take a look at it, at this section here. Section 88 is about Joseph's time to our time and the future for over 1,000 years. And did you see any indication of it referencing something that happened around 1202 AD? I didn't. Yet what I did see is that in verse 81, it says, behold, I sent you out to testify and to warn the people, and it becometh every man who hath been warned to warn his neighbor. Why? Look at verse 82. Therefore they are left without excuse, and their sins are upon their own heads. And here's a great blessing, 83. And he that seeketh me early shall find me, and shall not be forsaken. Now, look at this here, the action one. Therefore tarry ye, and labor diligently, that you may be perfected in your ministry, and go forth among the Gentiles for the last time, as many as the mouth of the Lord shall name, to bind up the law and seal up the testimony, and to prepare the saints for the hour of judgment which is to come. So what is this about? Converting Gentiles to saints and preparing the saints. Let's keep the last words in mind. For the hour of the judgment is to come. Why? What's to come? Let's read on and see what's so important here. To warn our neighbors. And is it to warn our neighbors about an earthquake that happened back in 1202 AD? Obviously not. Verse 85 clearly indicates that this event is about our day. And about, so let's go ahead and take a look. That their souls may escape the wrath of God, the desolation of abomination, which awaiteth the wicked, both in this world and in the world to come. Verily I say unto you, let those who are not first of the first elders continue in the vineyard until the mouth of the Lord shall call them, for their time is not yet come. Their garments are not yet clean of this generation. Now look at the next several verses. Verse 86, abide in the liberty wherewith ye are made free. Entangle not yourself in sin, but let your hands be clean until the Lord comes. For not many days hence, and the earth shall tremble to and fro as a drunken man, and the sun shall hide his face, and shall refuse to give light, and the moon shall be bathed in blood, and the stars shall become exceedingly angry, and shall cast themselves down as a fig that falleth off a fig tree. And after your testimony cometh wrath and indignation upon the people. For after your testimony cometh the testimony of the earthquakes, that shall cause groaning in the midst of her, and men's heart. Men shall fall upon the ground, and shall not be able to stand. And also cometh the testimony of the voice of thundering, and the voice of lightning, and the voice of tempest, and the voice of waves of seas, of the sea, heaving themselves beyond their bounds. And all things shall be in commotion, and surely men's heart shall fail them. For the fear shall come upon all people. And angels shall fly through the midst of heaven, crying with a loud voice, sounding the trump of God, saying, prepare ye, O inhabitants of the earth, for the judgment of our God is come. Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. I want to just have you take a look at this real quick here. So over here in Revelation chapter 6, we read about the earthquake over here, and we read about the people. Everybody goes and hides themselves in dens and rocks of the mountains and everything. And what do they say? They said, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come. Who shall be able to stand? Why are they thinking that this is the return of Christ in power and glory? Is because in section 88, we read that the angels are going to be flying through the midst of heaven, crying with a loud voice, sounding the trump of God, saying, prepare ye, O inhabitants of the earth, for the judgment of our God is come. And behold, and lo, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out and meet him. Isn't that a fascinating connection between the book of Revelation and the Doctrine and Covenants? We can see why the people think that is the return of Christ. The angels are out there saying it. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want you to just think about, what do you think? Do you think that this is referring to an event in 1202 AD or something in the future? Let's look at verse 87 again, the beginning of it. For not many days hence. From what I can tell, it looks like this 6-seal event is going to happen between about 2029 to 2032, somewhere around there. And what does that mean? That means that this is going to be something that if NASA and the powerful people and the people that are running these powerful telescopes, if they don't know that this object or objects is heading our way right now, they're going to know it here in the next few years. So when is the end of one seal and the beginning of another seal? Let's go to Doctrine and Covenants section 77. In verse 6, what we read is that it says, what are we to understand by the book which John saw, which was sealed on the backside with 7 seals? We are to understand that it contains the revealed will, mysteries, and the works of God, the hidden things of his economy concerning this earth during the 7,000 years of his continuance or his temporal existence. What are we to understand by the 7 seals with which it was sealed? We are to understand that the first seal contains the things of the first 1,000 years, and the second also of the second 1,000 years, and so on until the 7th. Really plain, really understandable. There's 7,000 years, and the 7,000 years is divided up in 1,000 year blocks. Each block is a seal. So plain and simple. Now, we know that Satan will be loosed for a little season, and Bruce R. McConkie and Joseph Fielding Smith said that they feel that that little season is going to be about 1,000 years. So in total, it will be 8,000 years until the judgment. And Christ came and made the atonement in the meridian of time. You think of all the important dates in the Earth's history. This is what I'm seeing, is that about 2 days before the end of the 4th seal, Christ went to the Garden of Gethsemane and made that precious, infinite, atoning sacrifice. He was then taken before Pilate and Herod, and he was crucified. And then the last day of the 4,000th year, his body rested in the tomb. And then on the first day of the 5th seal, he was resurrected. So his atonement and resurrection marked the meridian of time. Now, if we go to the Book of Mormon, 3rd Nephi, chapter 23, verse 9, look what Christ says. Verily I say unto you, I commanded my servant Samuel, the Lamanite, that he should testify unto this people, that at the day that the Father should glorify his, the Father's, name in me, that there were many saints who should arise from the dead, and should appear unto many, and should minister unto them. And he said unto them, was it not so? I think that this is more confirmation that atonement, the resurrection and atonement, marks the meridian of time. It's the day that Heavenly Father glorified himself through Christ. Now, have you heard of John Pratt? John Pratt is a famous astronomer. He has done a ton of work. And if you go to johnpratt.com, there's a lot of articles over there. One of the articles, right here, the birth date of Jesus, we see that he says that Jesus was born the evening before Thursday, the 6th of April, 1 BC. Now remember, though, that that's the Gregorian calendar, and remember that that the Jewish calendar is the day it goes from sunset to sunset. So it matches up perfectly what we read about in the Doctrine and Covenants, and it also matches up with what he finds about the Book of Mormon calendar system as well. So John Pratt has some phenomenal information to read over at his website. He also feels that when Christ was crucified, it was a very, very significant day in the calendaring system of the Hebrew calendar. So I really believe that April of 33 is the time in which the ending of one seal and the beginning of another seal. And using that information, then it's April of 2033, which would be the beginning of the 7th seal. So now you can see why I feel the asteroids or meteorites or whatever, that they'll probably hit Earth somewhere around 2029 to 2032. By about 2033, the 7th seal, that the evil world monetary system is going to be set up. I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to Bible Science Happening website and talk about some of the events that are going to be happening in the 7th seal to give us a perspective about how long from 2033 to the return of Christ in power and glory. So over here at BibleScienceHappening.com, up on the top right, if you'll click on Discoveries, then I highly recommend that you start over here on the left side and watch the clip on Revelation chapter 17, and then chapter 18, and then Daniel chapter 11, 8, and 7. Now, Daniel chapter 11 is the foundational chapter out of all the scriptures for understanding the general chronological order of events leading up to the return of Christ in power and glory. There's no other chapter that covers such a vast amount of time with as much detail, all in chronological order, without any major time gaps. It begins to be fulfilled in 1925. It ends with the return of Christ in power and glory. And it is a fantastic chapter to read, understand. It's foundational. Now, there has been some interpretation errors about it, and we're going to talk more about that in just a moment here. Now, after you watch those 5 clips, then I recommend that you go down and click on LDS references. It will drop down and have some other clips over here. Highly recommend that you watch the 2 clips on section 88. The first clip is going to touch a lot about what we've talked about now, and it's going to go into the 7th seal. And then the second clip picks it up from there and continues on with more details about the seventh seal. Great information. Also on this page, if you scroll down, you'll see that there's some great aids to help you learn. Now, there's the prophetic playbook story, and there is the chart, and then there's the poster. The prophetic playbook story is about 200 pages long. It's based on the book of Revelation, book of Daniel, the prophecies of our day from those books. And it helps you to understand the general chronological order of the events from 1925 to the return of Christ in power and glory. So within the book, again, only about 200 pages long. It has about over 100 pictures in there. It's in story form to bring out factual insights. And just within that 200 pages, there's over 50 huge, major, astonishing, and or significant Bible sign insights pointed out or discovered. Now, the chart, I'll talk to you more about that in a moment. The poster has 235 prophetic points listed on it. Now, primarily, the prophetic points are from the book of Revelation, book of Daniel, the prophetic events relating to our day. Some of the prophetic points are from section 88. So here's the thing, is that each prophecy will have a beginning point. So that's one prophetic point. Each prophecy will typically have an end point. That's another prophetic point. And then John, Daniel, the angels, or section 88 could have mentioned points in between. So taking all the prophetic prophecies and then breaking them down into prophetic points, I came up with 235 leading up to the return of Christ. I say leading up to the return of Christ. 214 to 235 is all about that time when he returns in power and glory. There's a lot of things that happen right when he returns. So if we're anywhere close to the return of Christ, then we're somewhere from prophetic point number 1 to prophetic point number 213. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chart. Here on the chart, now I'll give you a quick tour. So there's a line that goes right across here. Above the line is the sixth seal. Below the line is the seventh seal. So 2033 is that mark there. So there's a lot of things that happen after 2033, as you can see here. And we get some clues as to some of the timing of it. For example, over here, it talks about after certain years. So we have certain years to add on to 2033 before Christ returns. And then we got some wars and all kinds of things that are happening over here. And then down over here, this is where the daily sacrifice is taken away over here. And from about that point to the return of Christ is about 6 or 7 years. So we got 6 or 7 years here. We have certain years here. We have all these events that are happening in between here. So Christ is not going to be returning in power and glory until somewhere in the 2040s or the 2050s, somewhere around there. And what does that mean? Well, a couple of things. It means that, let's say that Christ returns in power and glory 2050. So then he begins a 1,000-year reign. That takes it up to 3050. And then Satan is loosed for a little season. Now, again, Bruce R. McConkie, Joseph Fielding Smith, they felt like that little season was about 1,000 years. And so making a total of 8,000 years from Adam leaving the Garden of Eden up to the Judgment Day. So in Christ, his atonement, meridian of time. Now, with that understanding, then you can see that Christ does not come back right at the beginning of the seventh seal. He doesn't come back at 2033. We see that there's a lot of events that have to happen after 2033. So I think that's the big point that I wanted to bring out. And so I hope that you'll see that we have a lot of things that we can study and have a great discussion about. So I hope that you'll get over there to Bible Science Happening and check that information out there. Now they're on to another very important point. For hundreds of years, it's been thought and taught that Daniel chapter 11 is about ancient times, like King Alexander the Great. Well, however, as some of you may know, I have had 2 DVDs in some Deseret bookstores back in around 2011 on this topic, and also on DNC 88. I had discovered that both John in the book of Revelation and Daniel in the book of Daniel, that they and the angels who spoke to them indicated that there will be a succession of 8 kings leading up to the return of Christ in power and glory. Major discovery. And I know this is new for most of you. However, I feel that there is now enough compelling evidence that many will start catching on to it now, and over the next few years, the compelling evidence will just grow tremendously. So, is the traditional interpretation about Daniel chapter 11 correct? Well, look at the heading of Daniel chapter 11. Daniel sees the successive kings and their wars, leagues, and conflicts that lead up to the second coming of Christ. Would that seem to indicate a stretch of time of about 2,500 years? So I diagrammed out Daniel chapter 11 here on this chart, and right over here. So this is all about Daniel chapter 11. And it talks about there's a lot of kings that it mentions over here and over here, but within the many kings is the succession of 8 kings right here. And now, can these 8 kings span from 530 BC to the return of Christ in power and glory? No, of course not. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the first 11 verses of Daniel chapter 11 and see if it indicates one after another, or what. So we begin with verse 1. It says, "Now this is an angel talking to Daniel. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will shew thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength and through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, which shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others besides those. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. But out of the branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. And shall also carry captive into Egypt their gods with their princes and their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his own kingdom, and shall return to his own land. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through, and then shall he return and be stirred up even to his own fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even the king of the north, and he shall set forth a great multitude. But the multitude shall be given into his hand." Did you pick up on any major time gaps? Well, those 11 verses touch on these 8 kings over here. Well, 6 of the kings right here. These 6 kings right there. And then 2 kings over here on the kingdom of the south, these kings over here. Well, as you can see, there's only 2 more kings left before the return of Christ in power and glory. And one of them only lives for a few days. And so does it seem possible? Now, I want to know which king is in power. What is his name? Where is he? Which king are we on? The first one or which one of the 8? So here's the thing that you can do, is that if you go over to Bible Signs Happening, over at BibleSignsHappening.com, just click on Discoveries and it'll take you over to this page here. And then you can watch clips on Revelation chapter 17 and then 18 and then Daniel chapter 11 and then 8 and then 7. And these Daniel 11, 8, and 7 are foundational chapters out of all the Bible, out of all the scriptures to date, for organizing the prophetic events of our day in general order. Those are the chapters I cover in the first 2 DVDs that were over at the Deseret bookstores back in 2011. A big difference is that since 2011, there's been events that have happened, and there's been prophetic people in the Bible that have been identified, and so you got to watch these clips. It's amazing. Now look at the past 400 years of what the pastors and Bible scholars have thought and taught about Daniel chapter 11. Look at this short clips I made years ago that goes over the common errors of just the first 10 verses. I share a lot of points very quickly. You may need to watch it twice. What we have read is a story about a succession of kings leading up to the return of Christ. If we are anywhere close to the return of Christ, then one of those kings is alive and ruling today. However, as you will see from this example by Ed Milhausen, he does not accept the fact that there is plainly an unbroken succession of kings leading up to the return of Christ. Ed does do a good job of explaining his information here on his website. Ed's good job of being articulate really helps us to see the obvious differences. With that being said, we've read the first 10 verses of Daniel chapter 11. There was no major gaps from verses 2 through 10. There are a succession of these 4 kings. The 4th king is rich and powerful and mighty, and when he shall stand up, he shall be broken, and his kingdom will not go to his posterity. His kingdom will be divided into at least a kingdom of the north and a kingdom of the south. When the king of the north dies, his son takes over. Years later, when that son vanishes, then a riser attacks his person, becomes the king for a few days, and then at that time he is killed by a vile person who later on is then killed when Christ returns. Yet Ed thinks that the first king in verse 2 is a king back around 530 BC. Daniel says these kings are from Persia, which today is Iran. Yet Ed thinks this mighty king is Alexander the Great, who's from Greece, which wasn't a king until over 100 years later, after the 4th king had died. Do you see over 100-year gap between verse 2 and verse 3, or verse 2 and verse 4? I don't. Ed then writes about this kingdom of the north and in the kingdom of the south as being 2 of the 4 generals who took over when Alexander the Great died. However, Ed writes that the 2 kings at the end of years are not those 2 kings. They are sons of those 2 kings who actually do make an agreement. But Daniel makes it clear to me that the agreement is not successful. Daniel wrote, "And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the kingdom of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. Even if we wanted to believe what Ed said is true, then there would have only been an unbroken succession of 3 more kings before Christ would have returned in power and glory. Christ would have returned in power and glory before he was even born. Ed and the Bible scholars and pastors and other church leaders who have taught this type of interpretation, where the first 3 kings began back around 530 BC, they're obviously and clearly wrong. Now it's time to focus our attention on what the right interpretation is. Wow! Talking about cherry-picking historic events to try and get them to match up with scriptures, this is a classic example, and it is widespread around the world. Yet, when you watch just the first 5 clips over at BibleScienceHappening.com under the Discovery tab, you are going to see why more and more people are agreeing the succession of 8 kings is about our day. So this is the homepage right over here. And if you click on Discoveries right here, and then if you go right down here to LDS references and just click on that, then you'll see that there's some videos over here. And this one here, right on DNC 88, and about building up Zion. If you click on that one there, you'll see that there's a nice clip. It's a really, really uplifting clip. So you want to check that out, and great information on what we've been talking about, goes more in depth on it. It's a fantastic ending, very uplifting. So you really want to be able to check that out. So get on over there to BibleScienceHappening.com, take a look over there, and God bless.